so nice to see people in a movie theater. This just warms my heart. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. It really means the world to me. Thank you.
It's such a great film to be here for as well, and so many ideas that circulate in it. Tom, let's talk about Bill Baker as a character. There's so much going on with him. He's so nuanced, and in some ways he's like a classic noir character. He's trying to figure out the truth, but there are all these other cultural issues that are going on. Let's talk about what you guys thought about in terms of that character and kind of getting him to the screen and all the layers that were within him.
It was such a long journey with this one, but I think ultimately, when I really started to tie into Bill was when I started traveling to Oklahoma in about 2016 and spending time with Roughnecks. A woman who works with me tonight, she's here, Ray Barron. And I said, Ray, find me some Roughnecks. And she's like, will do, what's a roughneck? And we sort of she just really dug in deep, made contacts. I started just visiting there, not just with Roughnecks, but various people from the Oklahoma landscape. And that was incredibly informative. The specificity of that subculture. Roughnecks are so iconic on the Oklahoma landscape. Anyone from Oklahoma here tonight, by any chance? That would have been real weird. So that was a real starting point. And then I was working with these two French writers at that point, wonderful artists, Thomas Bidigan and Noé Debré. They collaborate a lot with Jacques Audiard. And I would report back, and we kind of were just really feeding off each other at that point and sort of laying out the story as I was sort of accumulating this knowledge that kept feeding Bill. And then just the idea of dropping him in this landscape of Marseille was super exciting to us.
He's a fascinating character, and Matt Damon does such a phenomenal job. Let's give a round of applause, please, for Matt Damon. It's all these different solutions, everything from the kind of way he finds 50 different ways to say yes, ma'am, to the kind of the shading across his face as he realizes certain things are going on. What were some of the conversations like between you and Matt and bringing Bill Baker to the screen?
Well, first off, he's just a terrific actor, right? So there's that. He's a guy who's been working for so long. His passion and enthusiasm for the job every single day is incredible. It's almost daunting to work with. You're just waiting for the guy to have a bad day, and he just really doesn't. He just loves it, But, I think it started, Matt and I, really the first time we've known each other over the years, not super well, but we met in Oklahoma once he signed on to do the role. And I said, let's just meet. At that point, I'd been going for a while. I kind of had zeroed in on the Roughnecks that I thought were going to be most helpful, that were really able to articulate sort of their culture and how they would talk about the work and everything from their work to their family life and everything in between. So Matt and I met there and spent about 4-ish days just driving around from Oklahoma City to Stillwater to Tulsa and sitting with people. I probably interviewed about 25-ish Roughnecks at that point and sent him a lot of audio just so he could get the rhythm down. And then we just, two guys in particular, Kenny Baker and Ryan Stewart, we really spent time with them and their families and their colleagues, just visiting rigs, having barbecues, shooting guns, just doing fun shit and in Oklahoma. And it was incredible. And I will say, one of the things just personally that was most incredible, this is 2016, 17, 18, when we were at the height of division in this country. So much finger pointing, so much who's red, who's blue, who's good, who's bad. And here we are, a filmmaker from New York, a movie star from LA, and a couple of Roughnecks in Marlowe hanging out and just having this incredible adventure together. And these guys were so generous with their time and their insights. And it was really amazing to watch how quickly Matt just started digging in, watching how they walked, how they held their arms, how they led with their arms, what they did, hats, glasses, and we just would hang out, and then we'd go on drives, him and I, and he would just talk about the character. And he really started to bake the character right then. You could just feel it. And I think by the time we got to Marseille, it was feeling good. Then we rehearsed there. By the time we got to set, it was just clear he was going to disappear into the sky.
Yeah. Let's touch on that for a second, because there's so much going on in his eyes, but it's also a very physical performance. It's sort of unexpected in some ways. You mentioned the way he kind of walks and the way he holds the knapsack. There's a physicality to his performance here that I think is really is interesting, because it hits these other levels that you're not expecting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you spend time with these guys, you really realize how much he nailed that, right? So again, how he's holding his shoulders, his legs. It's a complete physical transformation. And I think like Mark Ruffalo does this really subtly and well too, and I saw Matt do it, where you're like, oh, it's really just a different person. And personally speaking, I think because Matt doesn't get the opportunity to transform as much as he would probably like to in his career, that he really relished the opportunity. And I even think the beard and the hat and the glasses early in the film allowed him just to let go. And I feel like my biggest job as a director was really just to give him permission to do what he does best, to free him up, to let him to know I was going to be there if he went too far off track at any point, but just to go there, and he would, and he could, and he did. You know, and it was really exciting to watch. Again, you could feel it on set. From day one, you're just like, oh, wow, that doesn't even look like him. We're standing back. It was like a wide shot. I always do this thing before I shoot a film. I'll shoot a couple of scenes the day before day one of principal photography. I just want to get the crew out there, work out the kinks, get people thinking, because you hit the ground running on day one, and I don't want to waste time or money. So we shot one scene or two scenes, maybe. One was his washing his truck, I think was the first. And we shot this wide shot from across the street, and the whole crew was there, and some other people, just because it was exciting. It was day one on set. We'd all been working our ass off to get there. And there was Matt just hosing down the truck, if you remember that shot. It's right before he picks up his daughter. And my production designer walks up to me, he's like, is it okay that it doesn't look like Matt Damon at all? And I was like, I'm wondering the same thing. I wonder how the studio is going to respond to this. They hired Matt Damon. But we could all kind of feel it from that moment that he was pretty locked in.
Abigail Breslin is also amazing as Allison. Let's talk about her performance and how the two of you kind of found the nuances within that character of Allison.
Yeah, I mean, for my money, it's the heavy lifting in the movie. It's the hardest line to walk. Because there's so much backstory and baggage, and she's been in prison for 5 years, and she's desperate, and she's angry, and she's, you know, I think there's real generational trauma in that family. I think that's a primary theme of the film on some level. And she's got to carry all that in and sort of push back against a Bill Baker, that in part because it's Matt, in part because it's Bill Baker, but we're sort of predestined to like and trust until maybe we don't at some point in the movie. So I feel like her job in this sort of cell, for most of it, is pretty tricky, and I just think she does a masterful job. You know, Abby's just an incredibly intuitive actress and kind of fearless. And it's interesting because if you ever spend time with Abby, her energy's all over the place. But when she got in that cell, it was just like thunk. It was like a different, completely different energy and focus. Primary focus about how to deal with her dad and her situation.
Yeah. Some people have seen that Amanda Knox has written about the film and taken issue with the film. What are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, it's kind of blown up today a little bit. Look, I deeply empathize with her situation, her circumstance, and her feelings deeply. But we've created something that's purely a work of fiction, right? I mean, it was sparked by the headlines and the real life headlines of the time, that element of the story. But from there, I really wanted to focus on Bill Baker, kind of his journey and themes that related to him and her in terms of their family life back in the US. There is the engine of the kind of thriller here, but I think you guys now know this isn't a thriller, regardless of what the trailer says. If you've come for a straight up thriller, you're probably mad at me right now. But be mad at Focus, not me. It's a more expansive movie than that. And, not to make light of this at all, but you get to a point where you realize, hey, this has got nothing to do with that, and nothing in my mind, because I was working with French writers who really didn't know the story at all. They just liked the idea of this father visiting his daughter and having to work through this dysfunction, and everything grew from there. And, if I'm going to tell a real life story like I did with Spotlight, I'm going to reach out, engage, and deeply connect with the real life participants who are being depicted. This just wasn't that situation.
Let's talk about Camille Catan as well, who's amazing, who plays Janie, and the dynamic that she had with both of that, and how you found her, because she is really extraordinary in the film.
I didn't know Camille at all. I went to France, to Paris, with this list of great French actresses. Every one of them, I was like, oh man, it would be great to work with any of these actors. I've seen their work for a long time. And I had slipped the script to a friend of mine in Paris, a guy named Stefan Faquinos, who is a wonderful casting director back in the day and now a writer and director in his own right. And he called me, he's like, I don't know if she's on your list, but you've got to see this actress, Kemi Cotton, for this role. And at that point, the writers and I were still really trying to find Virginie. You know, who is this woman? Like, what's her energy and her spirit? Theater actress, transplant from Paris, has a kid, can hold it together, but it's a little sloppy, but is like incredibly empathetic and open-hearted and inclusive in a way that maybe this particular type of artist is. And what's that energy? And it was really a tricky role. And Kemi quite literally just came in the room and just took it. You know, and I had met with her and I thought, she's great. I went back to my French writers who were very involved in my process. For obvious reasons. And I said, what do you guys think? And they were like, I don't know, I've never seen her do this. She's kind of does more comedy. And then they sat in the audition room with me and she left. And they were just like, well, that's obvious. You know, she's it. And man, she just has that kind of range as an actress of the specificity, and it's great to see in a big screen because just how present she is in every moment and how many levels she's playing every moment on. Because if you don't believe that Bill Baker can't end up a roommate when we come back from 3 months later, the movie doesn't work. Like, if you can't buy that she wouldn't bring him in, the movie doesn't work for you. So, and I think she's the hostess in that situation. She makes it work.
The word energy. The energy of Marseille also is really beguiling to you, what I've read, right? There's the Mediterranean noir and obviously all the the films that sort of take place in that, but also just Marseille as a place. It really, you found it very beguiling and really kind of intriguing in lots of ways. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you saw the city, right? It's incredible, and it's got so many layers, and it's a real working city. So if you've ever been to the Côte d'Azur at all, anywhere in the south of France, like there's a lot of those really beautiful cities, but they're very moneyed and very sort of static and very, in my mind, beautiful but stale and a little too quiet. Marseille is the polar opposite. It's thriving, it's growing, it's changing, it's modern, it's ancient, it's decrepit, and it's been welcoming, immigrants literally to their port for 2,000 plus years, right? So it has these layers. It's like New York on crack, right? It's got like all of that and more. And I think as a New Yorker on some level, I really connected with Marseille on that. I just feel it. Everything's hemmed in from the suburbs in the north where we shot the Caliste scene all the way down to the ocean and the rich hills above. They're all rimmed in by those mountains and the sea. So it's not like Paris where everything's spread out and pushed out and there's real dissonance. In Marseille, it's all very connected, and it was just really exciting. Every time in story we were reaching for something, I started going to Marseille 10 years ago in this project. You could just reach to another aspect of the thing, whether it's the Calanque or the Olympic Stade where OM plays, or these different sort of places where you felt like, oh my God, there's real story in there. There's real opportunity here to sort of plate our story. It was such a great canvas, and we didn't shoot on a stage once in Marseille. Every scene was live because we just couldn't. My DP Massa, who I adore, just couldn't get away from the light. The light, there's a reason that region's been attracting painters for centuries. It's just incredible, and we really wanted to capture that.
Let's talk about the DP Masataki Yanagi, who you worked with on the Best Picture winning Spotlight, and the film is so visually rich in lots of ways. What kind of tones and textures were the two of you going for with it?
What I love about Masa is just how character-based he is and how story-based. So we begin our work really just combing through script and him making sure he's understanding emotionally where my head is at every scene so he can translate it. And in some ways, he offers his insight, which is usually pretty spot on in my experience. But then we start to translate that with like loose shot listing and understanding of like visually what we're trying to say. And, so you'll notice in the camera basically, and in Oklahoma, to start, is very static. We're using wider, we're playing wider, we're giving Bill space, and we're feeling that. We want to feel the earth. As soon as he touches down in Marseille, we go to handheld, Steadicam, handheld then Steadicam, and we're on dolly sometime in there, but usually on a bag. We just want the camera to have movement, to feel it, and to be with him. And Masa, from that moment on, started operating handheld and was just very intimate with Bill. So, in both places, we were trying to also develop our palettes for both, as you point out, and what that looked like, not just Oklahoma and Marseille, but in Marseille. We start in that hotel Bill starts this movie very much on track. He's basically a mule, right? His job, as Sharon says, Bill, you're supposed to go there and come back. That's it. You know, he literally stays on that track until she hands him that note and he gets off. And then he has the meeting with Virginie where she translates the letter, and then he's sort of spinning out emotionally, and that sends him on this journey, somewhat ill-fated journey into the other side of Marseille. Then we really start feeling the textures, the color, the dirt, the grime, all of that.
Wrap up, Tom. There are so many ideas and themes in the film that really resonate. The American idea of heroism inverted, the sense of shame and guilt, like we talked about, that kind of goes between generations. What are some of the most important ones for you, and how did making the film change you?
Well, I think I'm still dealing with how it's changing me. I feel like I changed today because of this film. But yeah, what I'm most proud of about in terms of this film is I think it's a movie I couldn't have made until right now. I think it's without question my most complex film. I think it has very rich and fertile soil for all these themes and storylines. I think I was really structurally excited about challenging perceptions of genre, what lanes we had to stay in, and allowing the movie to drift, right? So allowing it to drift from somewhat of, bless you, somewhat of a mystery to a, what becomes almost a procedural investigation to somewhat of a thriller into a real drama and human drama, even some love story and family elements. Like literally letting the movie go in all those directions and change lanes. But for that to work, the tone has to be very consistent and really pushes us, not just me, but my entire creative team, to stay on point with that. We can't afford missed moments, even in the reality of the place. So that her apartment better feel lived in, and we come back 3 months later, you better subconsciously feel the progress from, oh, she was moving in, oh, now the art's up, and this change is made, and this has happened, and that's cool. I hope you're not noticing in the moment necessarily, but you're tracking it probably, right? So, I think that was just, as a filmmaker, the huge challenge in this. And then, having the opportunity to sink in and play with these themes. And, I think there's something I took away from our friends in Oklahoma, which they were like, look, you're going to do what you want with the story, but get us right, let them know who we are and let them know that we're not two-dimensional people, basically is what they were telling me, like, represent us as multi-dimensional people. And Bill may be stoic, but he's certainly that. And the people that have seen it from there have been, have been very excited. A bunch of them in for the premiere. And I was about as nervous for them to see it as I was the audience at Cannes. Because I'm like, okay, the French are definitely going to let me know if this sucks. They're just going to start booing and say it's not French, and you go home, bad American. But they didn't. They leaned into the movie, and I'm like, okay, check. But then having a couple of roughnecks at the screening on last Monday night was like, how are these guys going to take to this? And we had the best discussion about it afterwards. But I think mostly they felt like, we got it. One of them had a text exchange that she sent me today. She runs one of the oil rig services, and it was from a friend of hers, and she's like, oh man, Bill Baker's just like Scuggs. I don't know who Scuggs is, he's obviously a roughneck, but maybe a little bit smarter. Hold it. Maybe a lot smarter. And Davey's like, this is proof you got it. But then I realized, I think she was texting during the movie based on the timeline. That's a bummer. But I'll take the sentiment.
Yeah. Well, the film is so rich and complex, as you said, and satisfying and human. It's really terrific. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom McCarthy.
Thank you guys. How many scans in the movie?